Hello, everybody. I am returned, and I absolutely love the Gunners. They are one of the best factions in all of Fallout 4, and today I'd like to go over why.
Absolutely not.
What? Who said that?
This absurd mockery of my anti-gunner ideology displeases me. Begone, worm.
Well, folks, let's begin, shall we? This might sound a little strange to some people, but the Gunners are without a doubt some of the most wasted potential in Fallout 4, and that's saying a lot. First, let's go over what we know about them, at least what we can be relatively certain of. First up, the faction structure. The Gunners have a pseudo-military power structure where those of higher rank have an absolute authority over those of lower rank. They utilize a basic ranking system based heavily on a likely skewed understanding of pre-war US military ranks. At least assuming the Fallout universe uses the same ranking system as standard US military. Their ranks, that we know of at least, range from conscripted personnel up to supposedly brigadier. However, as far as I can tell, we don't actually encounter or even hear about anyone alive above the rank of captain within the Commonwealth. The highest, still breathing, gunners we can encounter are Captain Bridget and Captain Wes, the latter of which is at best a Wheatley-level moron. The highest ranking gunner we actually encounter in the Commonwealth is the very much not alive Major Jeffries. He is the one who ran afoul of an angry Mama Deathclaw in the Museum of Witchcraft. As far as Jeffries is concerned, I suspect that either he was misnamed or rather misranked by the developers, or again, the Gunners have a misunderstanding of pre-war military rankings. As I'm not convinced the ranking officer within a theater would be on a dangerous field mission, although I'm honestly not sure. And I'm also fully aware different military branches have slightly different ranking systems from which the Gunners could have taken inspiration. I honestly just prefer to think of the canon Gunners as idiots, though. Finally, I believe the highest ranking member we hear or read about is Colonel Cypress. Colonel Cypress is the gunner higher up that sent Commander Kaylor to Nuka World to investigate it. Oh, and by the way, Colonel Cypress and Commander Kaylor are why I suspect the Gunners have mix and match their ranking system from multiple pre-war military branches. As multiple branches have one of those ranks but not the other, I do admit I learned about this weird disparity through a scant few minutes of research, so my understanding of the real-world rankings may not be up to par. This, however, means I can't actually be truly certain of the actual ranks and what they mean, as far as to who's in charge of who. Deacon seems to believe they're taking orders from another party, but this isn't confirmed, and there is a 99.999% chance he's lying, because Deacon. One last note on this faction structure. Piper seems to think they have equal combat training to the Brotherhood. However, lore-wise at least, this is pretty much impossible, mostly because, at least as far as the Brotherhood under Maxon is concerned, which is likely the only Brotherhood any Commonwealth people have ever encountered, you either need to be born into it or have an already established high-ranking member sponsor your joining. And as far as gaining a sponsor goes, Dance makes you the offer to join them. You do not come to him asking to join. This may not be how every such sponsorship works, but considering the Brotherhood standards, it's a safe assumption that the joiner would need to be highly capable or very useful already. The majority of Brotherhood soldiers are likely trained from early childhood, and even if Maxon was willing to take just anyone who came to him asking for a place, they would still have to prove themselves. The Gunners will accept nearly anyone into their ranks, even former Raiders and former Minutemen. In terms of actual training, the Gunners are under no circumstances equal to the Brotherhood of Steel. Okay, on to their ideology and goals. The Gunners' ideology and goals are both, well, money and authority. They're mercenaries. Dangerous mercenaries, but mercenaries all the same. They are willing to do just about anything to earn caps, including outright theft and mass murder. They are also absolute in their authority over lower-ranking gunners, and usually have no real love for their commanders at all, meaning a gunner should always be on the lookout for the opportunity to progress in rank. Frankly, given the setting and the average personality and intellect of a gunner, they should resemble the Terran Empire from Star Trek, only far more subtle. They would not want to get caught doing this by anyone of even higher rank, after all. Captain Wes also seems to be a practitioner of passing the blame, so to speak, as he will go out of his way not to look weak by refusing to admit he gave a specific order, even if the order he claims to not have given was done out of common sense, and would likely be seen as such by most people, even other gunners. Let's move on to morality. Sorry about that, but they're mercenaries, and not ones with a code of honor or loyalty, at least not a collective one. Their only real loyalty is to caps. They do expect obedience from lower ranks, but that's not based on loyalty or honor, it's based on fear and the threat of violence. So, moving on to their story, such as it is. And, well, kind of like a moral compass, they don't really have one. Individual groups of gunners have some story behind them, but it's not usually anything in depth, and it's pretty much never connected with the overall organization in any important way. I also do not consider any Creation Club stuff canon to Fallout 4 at all, so it doesn't add to the faction's story as far as I'm concerned. Okay, now we have the basics. So, considering the title of the video, what are the flaws of this faction? Well, I'm gonna list them, and then I'll go over them in depth. 1. You cannot join them. 2. You cannot hire them. 3. Aside from technology, some discipline, and a few rules about chems, they are essentially fancy raiders. 4. Their behavior would scare off most clients. 5. They are often unnecessarily antagonistic. This could be rolled into 4, honestly. Let's go over these in order. Joining the Gunners, aka becoming the scum of the Fallout Earth. Ugh, just saying those first 3 words leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Okay, meeting them in a non-hostile way should be easy. This isn't the Railroad or Institute. They don't hide themselves, nor do they attack anything that moves. Finding someone who can actually recruit you, however, should be a tiny bit more difficult. It could, and probably should, be as simple as talking to any of the gunner guards hired by random traveling traders. You could ask them where they do recruitment. After they ask you a few basic questions, mostly to make sure they're not blamed for sending the headquarters a lemon, they would then point you to Gunner Plaza and mark it on your map. Obviously, if Preston sees this interaction, he should be unhappy. But oh well, it's our mistake to make. Once you reach Gunner Plaza, you should have to talk to one of the guards in the front for permission to enter. If you try to enter the building without permission, well, I hope you brought a lot of ammo with you. After getting permission, you should then be led to Captain Wes by a gunner. Trying to leave the path the gunner leads you down should also lead to the need for a lot of ammo. Obviously, the gunners wouldn't want an unvetted person running around their main base freely. Meeting Captain Wes should reveal that his personality is, at least on the surface, basically canon Arthur Maxim, without the overt racism. And y'all know how I feel about him. Underneath the surface, well, we'll get to that. He should ask you a few questions about your abilities and morals. Answer in a way that would make it clear you're not gunner material, you would be told to leave immediately and not be given a second chance. If you refuse, or get belligerent, well, back to the ammo thing. Once you give the right answers, or at least enough right answers, you should be sent to a lower-ranking officer to run a short series of errands for them and to be taught the rules and expectations of the Gunners Raider Gang, organization. Maybe even have to take a quiz on the rules after a few missions and maybe give a short report on each mission. After proving yourself competent, then actual mercenary work begins. Your first real jobs should be something simple, perhaps collecting protection money from a small settlement, or scouting a low-risk area, or clearing a few ferals from a potentially useful site. After a couple of these missions, and you've proven not to be a coward or an idiot, Then you should be sent to a higher ranking gunner to help out with actual important or dangerous missions. This officer should first send you to the gunner's in-house doctor to have your blood tested and then send you to get your blood type tattoo. You wouldn't have gotten it until now because many new recruits wouldn't make it this far, either through cowardice, being too soft, or just outright screwing up a mission and getting eaten by ferals, or worse. And the gunners have realized over time wasting the ink and their doctor's time for someone who isn't sticking around for whatever reason is just as bad as wasting ammo. This is the point you are tested, likely through combat or a difficult job, and given an actual rank based on your performance and decisions during the mission. If you do a subpar job, you are given the rank of private and have to earn your way up by successfully performing quite a few missions. If you do well during the test, you are given a slightly better rank, but still need to do a handful of grunt missions to work up to the solid rank. If you do incredibly well on the test, you would skip the mentioned grunt work and be given a decent rank in command of a small unit of lower ranking gunners. This would lead into a short series of missions to expand gunner territory, given to you directly by Captain Wes. Each time he gives you a mission, some subtle hint should be dropped that the man is not well. Maybe hearing him talk to himself for a split second, or have him contradict something he just said. This would get worse each mission, eventually leading up to you having to gather the support of the other high-ranked gunners in the Commonwealth to remove him from the equation. After doing so, you would receive a clandestine radio transmission congratulating you on dealing with the situation and telling you the other gunners in the Commonwealth have already been informed that you are in charge of the area, for now. This mysterious voice would also give the faction a good reason to be claiming territory as mercenaries. They're literally being paid to do so by an outside force for one reason or another. This would be the end of the gunner missions proper, but could theoretically open up a pseudo-settlement system where you take over useful places and station gunners at said areas to gather resources and defend territory. This pseudo-settlement system would be simpler to integrate if those missions you were running for Wes introduced them. And when I say pseudo-settlement, I mean that the majority of what goes into an actual settlement would be left out. All it would entail is assigning some gunners and maybe setting up basic communication systems. Okay, on to the gunners being basically uptight raiders. This is so obvious that Slag, a completely insane raider boss, views them as good recruits. Although, unlike most raider bosses, this one has some basic standards of capabilities. Make no mistake though, he's still every bit the monster other raiders are, just in a slightly more judgmental way. So, how to fix this? Well, honestly, I'm not sure this part needs fixing. The gunners are not supposed to be honorable or nice in any way. They're cap-obsessed mercenaries. However, they are often overly hostile and really dumb when it comes to territorial expansion. That expansion is kind of the real fundamental difference between gunners and raiders. Most raider gangs don't expand or even move their operation without a good reason, or at least a reason that can pierce the cloud of chems they tend to soak their brains in. So emphasizing that difference would probably be a decent fix. And well, I already emphasized it in the joining them section, maybe just add an actually detailed reason for it during said expansion missions. So I'd say we're good here. Moving on. Okay, now on to them scaring off most or at least a lot of clients. This is actually a big one. They're mercenaries. They need people to view them as very trustworthy and capable, at least as far as getting the job done goes. First, they should under no circumstances ever betray a client. This should be basic public gunner doctrine. And second, just in case they ever encounter a scenario where betraying said client would be vastly more beneficial to them than just doing the job, they should have a small branch of their forces in civilian clothes dedicated to spreading, let's call it heavily curated public information. This could also help with things like the Quincy Massacre. After all, who would trust a group that slaughtered a town full of innocent people? That's raider behavior. There is no way they could convince everyone in the Commonwealth that the actual story is untrue, but they wouldn't need to. Just create enough doubt that potential clients are comfortable with not factoring in that bit of history when hiring them. Obviously, it wouldn't matter to some clients, but others would definitely be more wary of such things, and the gunners would want as many potential clients as possible. Now, as for them being unnecessarily antagonistic, well, this could be fixed by having standard behavioral rules All gunners are meant to follow in public, set by the higher-ups. This would mean they could still be standoffish, but would not threaten or insult people in the Commonwealth, at least without good reason. It wouldn't change their actual personalities, just make it against the rules to behave in a way that would drive off clients. Oh, and before I forget, I didn't bring up the gunners warning people away from areas as a problem because it really isn't. Any group that went out of their way to clear an area of super mutants or raiders is going to be protective of their new resources, and the wasteland is a very dangerous place. They shouldn't just trust any random stranger who is willing to walk up to a heavily armed group of mercenaries. These changes would make them make more sense in-game. They would come off as more professional and capable. This would also make the Institute look far more intimidating. After all, the gunners that are attacked by a courser in canon are a group of barely functioning soldier cosplayers making all the wrong decisions. Missile launcher indoors. These new, more capable, at least in the public's eyes, gunners having the same amount of trouble with the courser would make said courser look far more dangerous, and by extension make the whole Institute look more dangerous. Making the Institute look competent is a different story for a different time, I suppose. Now, there is something I wanted to go over before the conclusion section of this video, and that is the quote-unquote rivalry between the Gunners and the Minutemen. And the reason for this is, after thinking about it far too much, I'm not sure there really was one pre-Soul Survivor, or rather, before the Minutemen's original collapse, aka Joe Becker saying his last goodbye. Hear me out on this. The simple fact is, as far as I know at least, we don't hear of the Gunners ever challenging the Minutemen before their collapse. The Gunners wanted Quincy. They knew it was prosperous, and knew it would be a fairly defensible position. And yet, assuming they knew about Quincy before this, which, considering it was a well-known prosperous settlement, that's a safe bet, why would they not attack it earlier? The simplest answer is probably the Minutemen. After all, a single poorly equipped group of leftover Minutemen wiped out a third of the Gunners' recon force at Quincy. And seemingly the only reason the Gunners won the full engagement, at least as definitively as they did, is a Minutemen turning traitor and likely giving the Gunners a full rundown on Minutemen tactics and the numbers and supplies Colonel Hollis was working with. And this was a small group of barely held together Minutemen. It is nowhere near their prime. Think about how the Minutemen came to prominence. They came to Diamond City's defense and fought off a horde of super mutants after hearing a broadcast for help from said city. The word horde implies there were a lot of super mutants. After all, there is quite a bit of super mutant activity around Diamond City, and it really doesn't seem to worry the guards all that much. This likely means when the horde attacked, it was massive. The Gunners, in their absolute prime, might have been capable of dealing with it, assuming Diamond City ponied up the caps. But therein lies the issue. That would be the Gunners in their prime, and it's still a maybe. And the Minutemen who protected Diamond City were nowhere near their own prime. After all, the Minutemen were still strong, or very likely much stronger, during the Broken Mast incident nearly 50 years after the Battle of Diamond City, and they actually got stronger still setting up the castle for the first time. And even when the castle fell, they kept going strong for another 42 years thanks to Joe Becker's leadership, and likely whoever was general right before him, unless he became general at a very young age. General Becker passing into that great fort in the sky during the year 2282 is the actual catalyst for the Minutemen's fall. His passing set in motion a lot of intergroup politics and flared up apparently already established rivalries that eventually led to the Minutemen slowly crumbling from within. And only after there are almost no true Minutemen groups left in the Commonwealth do the Gunners go after Quincy. This took 5 years to happen, by the way. So either the Gunners weren't in the Commonwealth proper during the Minutemen's glory days, which is kinda telling in and of itself. That would mean they either weren't properly established as a faction, or they didn't want to deal with the Minutemen in their prime. Or, just as telling, they were in the Commonwealth and chose to wait for the Minutemen to fall before attempting to claim settlements as Gunner territory. So, whatever logic you subscribe to explain this, simply means the Gunners never truly rivaled the Minutemen, and the Quincy Massacre is the only reason anyone believes they would make good rivals for the renewed Minutemen. It does kind of make sense. The massacre cemented the original Minutemen's fall in the eyes of the public. The Minutemen retaking Quincy and then marching on Gunner Plaza and taking off the Gunners HQ would likely be spread around the Commonwealth and give the people the feeling the Minutemen are truly back and absolutely not messing around. All that to say, there was probably never a real rivalry between the two factions, at least if all the dates and info I found regarding it are accurate. This probably could have gone in the Minutemen video, but I think it fits here just as well. In conclusion, the Gunners could be fixed by allowing the player to join them and eventually earn the right to lead said faction, being able to hire them, even as part of factions they're not fond of. They are mercenaries after all, why would they care where the caps come from? Fleshing out their expansion of territory so it makes more sense, or any sense in this case, and giving them a public-facing behavioral doctrine enforced by their higher-ups so they don't unnecessarily provoke fights that would waste resources or scare off clients. And maybe giving them something in their history that says they could have rivaled the Minutemen of the past. Although that last one's kind of unnecessary, the Minutemen you build and the Minutemen of their glory days are almost completely different organizations. Well, I guess that's about it for the bottom-feeding scum of the Commonwealth. Oh, it feels good to insult them properly. I think the only other time I did so in this script is at the beginning of the joining them section. Okay, I'm actually done now. So I'll just say, thank you for listening to my inane ramblings.